As around the sun, the earth knows she's evolving, and the rosebud know to bloom in early May. Just as hate knows love's the cure, you can rest your mind assured that I'll be loving you always. Now can't reveal the mystery of tomorrow, but in passing we'll grow older every day. Just as all that's born is new, you know what I say is true, that I'll be loving you always. Until the rainbows of the stars are in the sky. Always. Until the oceans cover every mountain. Always. Until the love flies in Paris and Red Sea. Always. Until we dream of life and life comes free. Did you know that true love asks for nothing? Her acceptance is the way we think. Did you know that life has given love the guarantee to last through forever and another day? Just as time to move on since the beginning, and the seasons know exactly when to change. Just as kindness knows no shame, know through all your growing pain, that I'll be loving you always. As today I know I'm living, but tomorrow could make me the past, but that I mustn't fear. For I'll know deep in my mind the love of me I've left behind, 'cause I'll be loving you always. Until the day is night and night becomes the day. Always. Until the trees and seasons start to fly away. Always. Take time, take the soul. Did you know you're loved by somebody? It's the day that I'll go. Always. Until the day that turns out I'll be loving you forever. Just for the sun and after always. 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 Until the earth covers every mountain high. Always. Always. Thank you, Peter and Vita. So over the last months, when I've been listening for a message for you all, that song has been resonating with me over and over and over. And that experience has been profound and a gift. And so I thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart just for the opportunity to be experiencing that. Because what I've experienced was being awash in love, consumed in love. And I couldn't tell if it was God loving me or me loving God, or it felt like all of that was happening at the same time. And it helped me understand what Sufi master Kabir Baminsky calls coinciding with love. And the part of me, it wasn't constant. And so for me, it was something of a barometer as to when I was fully present to that place in me where I touch God and God touches me. That's a place theologically we call the mystery of the incarnation. And some theologies say that it only happened in Jesus. Quakers had a different experience. Our understanding has been that the light that's in me and the light that's in you and the light that was fully embodied in the person of Jesus of Nazareth was the Christ that was before time was and will be after time is over. And that's all of the same exact substance. In the prologue of the Gospel of John, which is often called the Quaker Gospel, although some Quakers don't like it very much. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. And we use that light metaphor quite a bit in Friends, and I think a lot of us don't know what it's referring back to. It's referring back to that passage in the Gospel of John. Isaac Pennington had many, many names for the divine, and like many early Friends, it wasn't that those names weren't doctrinally derived. They were his trying to put language to the experience he was having. And here are some of Pennington's names for that divine principle within. The spirit of life and truth. The light of God's Holy Spirit shining in the heart. The inward sea. The light of life. The appearance of the Lord in my spirit. And early Friends refer to themselves as the children of light. The prologue goes on. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. So this is core Quaker theology that each of us has that spark of the divine. No one is without it. And that understanding is shared in mystical traditions across traditions and across time through many, many cultures. Here's a contemporary, Thomas Merton, Trappist monk. At the center of our being is a point of nothingness which is untouched by sin and illusion, a point of pure truth, a point or spark which belongs entirely to God, which is never at our disposal, but from which God disposes of our lives, which is inaccessible to the fantasies of our mind or the brutalities of our own will. This little point of nothingness and absolute poverty is the pure glory of God written in us. As our poverty, as our indigence, as our being children of God, it is like a pure diamond blazing with the invisible light of heaven. It is in everybody. And if we could see it, we would see these billion points of light coming together in the face and blaze of the sun that would make all the darkness and cruelty of life vanish completely. I have no program for this scene. It is only given, but the gate of heaven is everywhere. So this is place in us where the spark of the divine lives, is the root which gives life and power to our practice, to our worship, and to our witness. And to take seriously that I think we're pretty comfortable with the idea that there's that of God in somebody else, particularly when they're acting unfavorably towards us. We remind ourselves, oh yeah, there's that of God in that person. I should not get my dander up. I find it harder to fully take in that there's that God in me. And what does that mean? And what does that call me to? And by implication, then there's a part of me that is not that part of God. And how do those two work? Favorite metaphor for that comes from the Upanishads, which is those were ancient Sanskrit scripture that predated Hinduism. Goes like this. Two birds sit on a branch. One eats the fruit, the other watches. Both are necessary in our lives. The part of us that eats the fruit, that has the job, that has the children, that navigates through life, that does the work, is necessary and good and important. And the part that gives us life and power is the one that watches. The one that many of us spend our lives seeking for. So, learning to work with that is important anytime, and even more so in challenging times. And friends, we are in very challenging times, and they're going to get more challenging. Much more challenging. I draw inspiration from someone who lived in even more challenging times, Eddie Hillesum, who was a Jew living in Amsterdam during the Nazi occupation and the Holocaust, and who eventually volunteered to go to the camps to be of spiritual support for the people who had been taken there. And she died in the camps. This is what she wrote in her diary before she went to the camps. Dear God, these are anxious times. Tonight, for the first time, I lay in the dark with burning eyes as scene after scene of human suffering passed before me. I shall promise you one thing, God, just one very small thing. I shall never burden my today with cares about my tomorrow. All that takes some practice. Each day is sufficient to itself. I shall try to help you, God, to stop my strength from ebbing away, though I cannot vouch for it in advance. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear to me, that you cannot help us, that we must help you to help ourselves. And that is all we can manage these days, and also all that really matters, that we safeguard that little piece of you, God, in ourselves, and perhaps in others as well. Alas, there doesn't seem to be much you yourself can do about our circumstances, about our lives. Neither do I hold you responsible. You cannot help us, but we must help you and defend your dwelling place inside us to the last. So how do I care for this place? How does each of us care for this place? Tend to it. This root where we're connected to the divine. First and foremost, get to know it through worship or almost any contemplative practice. And over time, learn to see how the rest of us, we call it the personality or modern psychological language, the ego self, how it tries to masquerade as all of us, preserving the illusion that it is me, it is you. And finally, this is for many the most challenging, learn to let that place in us lead. And the metaphor that works best for me in that is that of a dance. I've done both ballroom dancing and contra dancing, and in both, I've done both the role of the lead and the role of the follower. The follower isn't just this limp thing pushed around the floor, or if you get a partner like that, it's really no fun. You give each other, what you do is called giving each other weight. You lean back, lean back. There's a dynamic tension between the two as you move together. You're intimately connected, but there's one who leads and one who follows. Isaac Penning put it this way, in a quote that's pretty famous, although most Quakers leave off the beginning and the end of it. Makes some of our liberal friends uncomfortable. Know what it is to walk in the path of life, and indeed, what is alone capable of walking therein. It is that which groans and which mourns, that which is begotten of God in thee. The path of life is for the seed of life. Therefore, keep in the regeneration, keep in the birth. Be no more than God hath made thee. Give over thine own willing. Give over thine own running. Give over thine own desiring to know or be anything. And sink down to the seed which God sows in thy heart, and let that be in thee, and grow in thee, and breathe in thee, and act in thee, and thou shalt find by sweet experience that the Lord knows that, and loves that, and owns that, and will lead it into the inheritance of life, which is his portion. And the part that's left out. And as thou takest up the cross to thyself, and sufferest that to overspread and to become a yoke over thee, thou shalt become renewed and enjoy life and the everlasting inheritance in that. So let's work with that passage a bit, because there's probably all kinds of knee-jerk reaction words in there. Early friends talked about the joy of the cross. It's really common in the journals. What that means is the joy that comes when you fully let go. When you have clearly been led, and you know that it's from God, and it's something that's frightening as hell, and you don't want to do it, and you resist, and you resist, and you resist, and when you finally let go, the joy is incredible. And I know that from my own experience. So what else we can do to tend that seed in us, that root in us, is to learn the ways the ego reasserts itself, ways in which we choose to not stay connected to that place within, to not align ourselves with love, to not be led in the dance, but to go our own way, thinking, I've got this, I've got this. When I was on retreat, preparing the first program of participating in God's power, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was shown an open book, and on one side, there were listed all the ways in which I resisted being fully in God's care. There were easily 10 or 12 on the list there. When I woke up, I could only remember 2. That's the power of spiritual amnesia. I could remember my desire to be viewed as somebody important, and what I did with my attraction to women. That was the beginning for me, and I found that as we become willing to see more, we're shown more. So since then, I've seen a bunch more. Maybe they're on the list. I don't know. My working myself too hard, my not getting enough rest, my addictive use of my news feed, my perfectionism. Those are all ways in which I disconnect. The connection's always there, and the choice is always there. And sometimes I choose to disconnect. So learning to know which are our favorite ones and choosing to not do them. I have found that awareness is curative. So I'd like you to take a moment now and go into prayer or worship and ask your inner teacher, inner guide, the inner Christ, to show you at least one way in which you keep yourself separate from love, separate from being fully relaxed into God's care. So just take a minute, and I'll wait for you. And those of you online, I invite you to do the same thing. So take a moment and write it down, because you may not remember later. And if nothing came to you in this short time, write the query down. And truly, I have found this to be a process where once you start, you just start seeing more and more. Other ways in which we can tend that root, tend that tender place within us where we touch God and God touches us. Another is not demonizing our opponents. When we do that, we lose our connection to love, our connection to our heart, and our capacity to see them as also being children of God. Martin Luther King prayed repeatedly and ardently to have enemy thinking removed from him. It's really hard when people are being beastly to not be bitter and angry and resentful. And yet when we do that, we lose our connection to the source. This is another quote from Eddie Hillisman. One day, I shall surely be able to say to Ilse Blumenthal, yes, life is beautiful, and I value it anew at the end of every day, even though I know that the sons of mothers, and you are one such mother, are being murdered in concentration camps. And you must be able to bear your sorrow, even if it seems to crush you. You will be able to stand up again, for human beings are so strong. And your sorrow must become an integral part of yourself, part of your body and your soul. You mustn't run away from it, but bear it as an adult. Do not relieve your feelings through hatred. Do not seek to be avenged on all German mothers, for they too sorrow at this very moment for their slain and murdered sons. Give your sorrow all the space and shelter in yourself it is its due. For if everyone bears his grief honestly and courageously, the sorrow that now fills the world will abate. But if you do not clear a decent shelter for your sorrow, and instead reserve most of the space inside you for hatred and thoughts of revenge, from which new sorrows will be born for others, then sorrow will never cease in this world and will multiply. And if you have given sorrow the space its gentle origins demand, then you may truly say, life is beautiful and so rich, so beautiful and rich that it makes you want to believe in God. Another way to tend this root is to become aware of our projections, those unhealed parts of ourselves that our opponents so conveniently model for us. And then we attack them, those projections outside ourselves. For me, when I was doing years of anti-fracking work in my local community, trying to get a moratorium in the town of Homer, I was treated incredibly disrespectfully over and over and over again. I was on the zoning board trying to craft with a mixture of anti-frackers and landowners who had leased their land to the gas companies, zoning regulations for our town. And at the time, what really got me more than anything else was the lies. It wasn't the devastation to the land. It wasn't people getting cancer. It was the lies of the gas companies being dressed up as the truth. And looking back on that, what I realized is I grew up in a family where the internal reality was very, very challenging, but the external reality was all rosy. So as a whole family, we were living a lie. So for me, that's a hot button. So to know where your projections are and to pull them back, it's another way we can tend that root. Richard Rohr speaks of that. The motivation, meaning, and inherent energy of any action come from its ultimate source, which is the person's foundational and core vantage point. What is his or her real and honest motivation? Who is doing the seeing? And here by who, he means which part of you? The spark of God or the ego? Is it the cut-off branch, the ego self, trying to do the seeing? Is it a person needing to be right? Or is it a person who wants to love? There's a very different kind of seeing from a branch that has remained lovingly and consciously connected to its source. Early friends, most all of their activities could be understood within the context of what they call the Lamb's War. And that's based on the book of Revelation. where the Christ in the form of the Lamb did cosmic battle with the evil of the serpent. And I believe, and so their evangelization, their action on concerns, which is what they call, things we would call social action, were all part of the Lamb's War, which was a 200-year project to bring the entire earth into the reign of love, as they knew it. And I believe that we Quakers today need a modern, re-theologized version of the Lamb's War. An understanding of all that we're doing grounded in love. We speak of witness, our work being witnessed. What are we witnessing to? Are we witnessing to a love that has the power to transform the world? Here's a quote from Adrienne Marie Brown, who is a queer, Black, young adult activist from Detroit. If love were the core practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have a massive impact on what was considered organizing. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through eyes of love. So the goal is not to win any particular battle. We will have plenty of battles in front of us. The goal is to touch that of God in the other person, inviting them into the grand conspiracy. To breathe together, conspire. To be together, to know ourselves as one. It's helpful, I think, to have some examples of what we're talking about, because this sounds kind of abstract. At the height of apartheid, when it looked like the South African government had all the power and would be in power until the end of days, and that the only thing that could ever break the power of the South African government would be a violent revolution. Archbishop Desmond Tutu went and visited President de Klerk, and he said to him, "It's not too late for you to join the winning side." Invitation. And miracle of miracles, de Klerk did. Here's another story. This one, written by Charles Eisenstein, about a woman in Afghanistan. I'm reminded of an Afghan woman I know named Sakina. She does peace and education work in Kabul, including the education of girls. This is a dangerous line of work in a place where religious fundamentalists believe that educating girls should be punishable by death. And indeed, Sakina receives her share of death threats, something to be taken seriously in that place. One day, Sakina was in a car with her driver, 2 staff people, and her unarmed bodyguard. Suddenly, the driver stopped. A makeshift roadblock was ahead of them, manned by 20 or so young men dressed in fundamentalist garb, armed with rifles, which were pointed at the car. "Tell Sakina to get out," they shouted. Bravely, the driver said, "You got the wrong car. There's no one here by that name." "Oh, yes, there is," they replied. "We know she's in there. We've been watching her." Sakina got out of the car and strode up to the young men. "I'm Sakina," she declared. "What do you want?" For the next half hour, the 4 people in the car watched as Sakina talked to the young men. Finally, she returned to the car and said, "Okay, we can go now." Astonished, her staffers asked what had happened. She told them that the young men had decided that they wanted to be educated too, just like the girls, and had arranged to meet her again the next week outside a certain mosque. Such is the power of staying open and connected. Even with guns pointed at her, Sakina refused to see the young men as anything less than divine human beings. She refused to reduce them in her vision to praised terrorists or subhuman fundamentalists. She saw them as promising young men who of course wanted an education. Her fearlessness and goodwill exerted an invitation so compelling that the men were nearly helpless to refuse it. A query that has had power for me lately is, what does love require? What does love require? Although I've done years of eco-justice work and years of anti-racist work, my great portion of my energies these last 10 or 15 years certainly has been working with friends on the mystical practice. And I'm feeling that it's out of balance. And I've been looking for how to connect what I have learned about mystical practice with the kind of eco-justice work that I've done in the past and the anti-racist work that I've done in the past, which I don't think were well connected. And it's a query I'm still living out. And the query, what does love require, pushes me to be looking for not only a deeper connection with the divine, but what does that connection require of me? The last verse of that song by Stevie Wonder goes like this. And the way he sings it, I can't even imitate. I won't even try. We all know sometimes life's hate and troubles can make you wish you were born in another time and space. But you can bet your lifetimes that, and twice it's double, that God knew exactly where he wanted you to be placed. So make sure when you say you're in it, but not of it, which has been something Quakers have said about us in the world, you're not helping to make this earth a place sometimes called hell. Change your words into truths, then change that truth into love, and maybe our children's grandchildren and their great-grandchildren will tell. I'll be loving you till the rainbow burns the stars out of the sky, loving you until the ocean covers every mountain high, loving you until the dolphin flies and parrots live in the sea, loving you until the dream of life and life becomes a dream, loving you until the day is night and night becomes the day, loving you until the trees and seas just up and fly away, loving you until the day that is the day that are no more, loving you until dear Mother Nature says her work is through, loving you until the day that you are me and I am you. We'll go back into worship.
Thank you, friends. Chris, can you take questions or here's some comments from the audience?
Sure.
Thanks. Friends, do we have questions or comments for Chris? Christopher.
I understand some of the theory of what you're saying, but not much of the practice. Because I see myself now in a world that is making war on women.
A world what?
A world making war on women, on their bodies, their choices, etc. And we are in a state which is almost the center of the centrifuge here. And we have to, here in this state, we have to act in a Quakerly way to alleviate suffering and restore justice. This is what my Quaker belief tells me.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of how we can apply love to restoring this justice and alleviating this suffering?
That's a good question. I think the way I would answer that is, if you don't try to do it through love, the ultimate, we won't reach a satisfactory resolution, and we'll keep in cycles of disagreement and emotional and physical violence. So I don't have a concrete answer for you. And I know that feeding the current maelstrom of division and baiting each other and hating each other won't get us there. I know that. How to move forward in love on that, or name 4 or 5 other issues, is something I'm exploring myself. But what has come to me is, and has been, the experience of being deeply connected to that place that Quaker journalists have written about for 350 years. And knowing that staying connected to that is at least the first step. And living that out in ways small and large. not demonizing our opponents, refusing to be in fear, refusing to cooperate. That's the best answer I can give you. Casper.
Thank you. A lot of what you say really resonates with me. I am a queer transgender person, and so I live through a lot of hate. And it's tempting, yeah, sometimes to be angry, and I get angry, of course, at the onslaught of anti-trans and gender-affirming legislation, yada, yada, yada. But still, I often can empathize and see that of God in others. In fact, I often call myself a religious vampire because I feed off of that of God in others. I don't think I was raised an atheist and was a fervent atheist until a few years ago. And so my question for you is, how do I connect with spirit, that of God within me? Because I don't have a clue.
One size does not fit all. But that's a great query to live. I think the place I would suggest you start is what nurtures your spirit, and do more of that. And do it daily.
Thank you. Christopher, excuse me.
William.
Yes. Liz Jenkins from our online audience asks, how important to you is letting go of outcomes in your own experience?
Would you repeat the question?
How important to you is letting go of outcomes in your own experience?
I would take that one step further. What I find critical in my experience is letting go, is living from a place of surrender, because that's where I find strength, clarity, power, and guidance. If I'm attached to outcomes as one way of not being in a place of being better, but there are many others. So that's part of what I would like to live differently. And like all of us, struggle with it every day.
Are there other questions or comments from friends?
Yesterday morning at 9:30, worship sharing, a poem or a game came to me, and it reads, "Let's play. I'll be you, you be me, for a change."
Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher, for bringing as your opening and closing.
Other comments from friends? Questions? Other comments or questions from friends?
I think the first thing you mentioned was being held by God, how would you feel? That seems like a really good step to me. Especially when you're afraid, or when I'm afraid. It made me think of a time when a number of us were boycotting or trying to get PNC Bank to stop doing mountaintop removal. And we had a number of our youth from this yearly meeting. I don't know if the parents ever knew, but we were sitting in the middle of this bank on the floor. And I think we were terrified. And at some point, this was a small bank. And at some point, we were sitting very close together and the music came on from, that was being piped in. It was very reassuring. And it was like God sent us a little message through this. But it took away that demonizing. And we had practiced numerous times before we went in there. Many times to let go. And even though we were afraid to sit still. It helped us to see up close. They were no longer some bank far away. We were in the bank. It helped us to see the faces of the tellers there. The expression on the people who were coming into the bank. None of them were hostile towards us. Now, eventually the police did come in. And I think once again we had to remove that enemy thinking. So we started singing. We sang, I think we sang "We Shall Overcome." And we've been practicing what to do when the police looked like they were getting ready to take us. So we kept singing, and we stood up, and we started walking out of the bank. And with us were the customers in the bank who walked out with us. And none of us said anything toward the people working there or the police. So I think one of the learnings I got from that I'm hearing here is also practice. Practice looking at a situation and remembering that God is holding us. And remembering that we have strength that we don't know if we're together. And that's what I learned from our youth. They were ready to do this. They showed us the way. And they worked together. So it was, I think I learned from that, it's not something I can do alone. I need others with me.
Thank you, Steve.
Christopher, thank you for the gift of invitation that you gave us tonight, and also for helping me remember that the great barrier that I have to overcome is my own thinking. And I wanted to ask you if you would be willing to expand a bit on the Lamb's War, struggle with early friends, and how we may use it today. I always understood it as an internal struggle. I'd love to hear how you understand.
Well, you know, I'm actually really glad you asked that. Thank you, because I felt like I didn't cover that as fully as I would have liked to once I sat down. My understanding of the Lamb's War was that friends wanted to spread over the entire world their sense of the truth, which was that God was present and leading and guiding and could be found in an unmediated fashion in our own hearts. And work in prisons and lots of other what we would call social concerns were actually reaching out to people in love, reaching out to try to reach that of God in them, much like Woolman did with the people who owned slaves, out of concern for them. There are modern Quakers who are doing prison ministry, and they're trying to do as much ministry with the guards as they are with the incarcerated people, because prison guards have the highest rates of alcoholism, divorce, drug addiction, suicide. I mean, it's a devastating occupation to have. So it's a willingness to extend love to everyone, to try to bring the sense of beloved community to include the entire world. I believe that we are called to do that still. And while we hold a broad range of microtheologies and liberal friends, I think the core of it is being willing to be grounded in love and to invite others into that community of love. Much like the people doing prison ministry today are trying to invite the guards in by being warm and friendly and engaging, even though the guards start out stone-faced, and it takes years to build up relations with them. That would be one example. But I feel in many ways that as modern friends, we have lost connection to that root, to a felt sense of connection to the divine. And we don't teach that to our newcomers, and we don't teach that to our children. And we need to reclaim that basic, fundamental aspect of our practice. As many of you probably know, early friends had what they called keeping the watch, which was at the end of the day, going back over the day in kind of an examined fashion. Did I stay connected today? Or did I go off on my own? Was I led? Did I stay connected to my guide? These are just not quaint journals. I mean, this is what gave our movement life and power. Does that answer your question at all? Okay.
Other questions or comments for Christopher? Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you, friends. It's been a blessing.
like to invite everyone to